Welcome to the channel for the future caretakers of resurrected species. Welcome to the Paleo-Zoo-Keepers Association.
Oh, hello there. Welcome to the Paleo-Zoo-Keeper Association special. My name is Austin. In this third and final video of this dragon trilogy, we are going to talk about rewilding the dragon. Now, I'm pretty certain as any logical person would agree on is that when resurrecting any kind of extinct species, the best thing the proper use for this would be to eventually not just resurrect the animal, but to be able to breed the animal in captivity to eventually reintroduce it back into the wild. And while a lot of animals that are currently being done for de-extinction projects, such as from the woolly mammoth to Tasmanian tiger, the mountain dragon would definitely be an interesting inclusion to this in this scenario. Since it's not a dinosaur which died out long ago, it's an animal that died out in the late 15th century. So centuries away. So probably died because they died off around the same time that the Haas eagle and the giant moa died off in New Zealand. So resurrecting this animal to reintroduce back to the wild would definitely be interesting. But before we get into rewilding the mountain dragon, I think it's best to start with how to breed these dragons in captivity. Why we talk about this before talk about rewilding the dragon? Well, we need the dragons to be able to breed for themselves and be able to increase the population. Well, they'll probably be cheaper than constantly resurrecting every dragon around. And at the same time, we have to make sure that the species can be able to sustain itself when reintroduced back into the wild. So, let's talk about breeding the mountain dragon.
Using what we know and observe from the mockumentary, we can have a good idea on the breeding of mountain dragons in captivity, and even with that, breeding the dragons in captivity would be a Herculean challenge.
According to the mockumentary, female dragons would become sexually mature when they become 7 years of age, basically 1 year after they have left the nest or they have left their mothers. Now, the mockumentary is not very clear on when males become sexually mature, but from what we know of crocodiles and several other animals, not all, but several of them, it's more likely the males will become sexually mature a little later than the females would. In the case of mountain dragons, I would probably assume that they'll become sexually mature at somewhere between 8 or 10 years of age, maybe even later.
Once the female dragon reaches sexual maturity, she will leave scent markings to show that she is receptive, although it is uncertain if it is by way of urine or some sort of scent gland. According to the mockumentary, the pheromones could be detected by a male dragon from vast distances of hundreds or even thousands of miles away. This could have an effect on captive males that were able to smell the receptive female from a nearby, relatively speaking, facility, so that would need to be watched out for.
According to the mockumentary as well, along with scent markings, a female mountain dragon would also use reflective objects to be able to help attract the males. This is most likely because, according to the mockumentary, dragons are naturally attracted to shiny objects. It's an adaptation so they can be able to find deposits of platinum. This is not too dissimilar from how male bowerbirds will use objects, especially like blue objects, to be able to attract females. So I can imagine that in a captive situation, a female captive mountain dragon would probably hoard their reflective objects like the disco boomer ball I mentioned in my last video up in an open area so they could be able to try to attract willing males.
When you want to start breeding dragons, one must resurrect a decent number of dragons with each individual having their own unique genetics. and set up a stud book for the dragons. The stud book is a way to organize the breeding of the dragons to avoid inbreeding and match up individuals whose genetics would complement each other and keep the gene pool strong so that the resurrected species can have the genetic diversity that would help it survive in the wild and into the future.
However, even if you're able to get the dragons with the right genetics and good matchups, actually breeding them would be one heck of a challenge. Probably be the greatest challenge for conservationists of any variety to be able to successfully breed these dragons, because these guys have quite the crazy form of mating.
The reason that I say that is that, according to the mockumentary, mountain dragons breed by flying to the highest point up, lock talons with each other, and drop off from the sky in a free fall, much like bald eagle pairs. As they fall down from the sky, they would quickly breed chest to chest with each as they fall in a span of time of around 25 seconds, and separate before they hit the ground, breathing out fire as they do so. This form of mating is most likely as part of a mating dance to test the male, like how female cheetahs would force males to chase after them, and if the males can keep up, they can mate.
From what I'm able to see from the mating and how fast it went, I would theorize that dragons would breed via what's called a cloacal kiss, which means that out of the cloaca, which is basically the hole that birds and reptiles and some mammals have, where they poop, pee, and breed in the same hole, that the male dragons don't have penises, and all they would need to do is make sure their cloaca just touch each other so that sperm can be transferred to the female. So that way it could be done very quickly. This is a breeding method that's been observed in a lot of birds. So it would definitely be possible that as they do that 20-second drop to breed with each other, it will be a cloacal kiss, so that way it could be done quickly. Now, mind you, even if they do successfully do that, it's most likely they probably won't get it the first try. They'll probably need to do several mating attempts before they can actually get a pregnancy. So, yeah.
Unless artificial insemination could be accomplished with the mountain dragon, natural breeding would have to be the best way to do it. For breeding dragons, I would propose in making a type of cage that is wide enough for two dragons to fly around comfortably, yet tall enough for the dragons to feel confident enough to commence with their free-fall breeding. I would have to say that the cage or dome would be as tall as skyscrapers. This would be both expensive and difficult to get the right height. I would also propose that to compensate for height issues, the cage or dome should have a large amount of indoor skydiving fans in the bottom, along with other structural developments to make the fans work effectively, so that the dragons could free-fall breed with the chances of hitting the ground be minimal.
As mentioned before, this will be challenging and immensely expensive to accomplish. But unless artificial insemination can be done for dragons, this will probably be the best we could do, and especially for a naturalistic breeding. But at least the good thing is that, according to the mockumentary, this breeding ritual comes naturally for dragons. So we don't have to teach them how to do the breeding deal, unlike some other animals like the giant panda, for example.
When the breeding is successful, the time from the successful mating to the egg laying is unknown, but it could be for a few weeks or maybe even months.
I mentioned weeks because that is generally how it goes for egg-laying animals like birds. But I also mentioned months because, well, remember I mentioned in my very first video that with large eggs like rat tides, like ostriches, for example, they will generally take like months to be able to incubate. But I also relearned that, according to the mockumentary, the dragons would have a incubation period of 30 days, basically a month. Now that's pretty short. That's pretty short for a big egg such as that. Well, of course, an egg is probably bigger than this. Now, I theorize that maybe the mountain dragon, once they have successful mating, they keep their egg internally for a pretty long period of time compared to birds and reptiles. Because since they live in very cold areas and they pretty much gone through the ice age, they probably keep the egg or eggs. The nest that was found in the Romanian cave did have 2 eggs. One hatched, one died. They probably keep them internally for a long while until they're ready to lay them, and at least keep them warm for 30 days. So that's basically what I would say about it. However, once the dragons start making a nest with stones, once they make a nest made of stones, similar to how some penguins would make a nest, and especially make a nest that looks like a cairn, which is basically a pile of stones. You find them a lot in Scotland and other such places. Once they start making that cairn, you gotta be prepared to get the eggs as soon as they are laid. And why is that, you ask?
When the mountain dragons lay their eggs, it is imperative to get the eggs to the incubators as soon as possible, because the captive dragons lack the one thing they would naturally use to incubate their eggs, and that is fire. Mountain dragons, as well as the other dragons of the mockumentary, make their fiery weapon by igniting their hydrogen gas as they shoot it out of their mouths with platinum that they have crushed by using their specialized molars. In captivity, the best way to avoid this hazardous weapon is to just don't give them platinum, since breathing fire would be a health and safety hazard for zoological facilities. Also, platinum is a rare and valuable mineral that currently in 2024, by the time of developing this video, has a market price of $940.94 per ounce. So, giving dragons this would be both dangerous and expensive, so it would be best to avoid this. However, dragons actually use their fire to warm up their nests, help incubate the eggs, especially since they generally nest in immensely cold areas. But without platinum, the dragon would just breathe out mist like a fog machine, since hydrogen contacting with oxygen makes water after all. And with this, the dragons would try to warm up the nest with their misty breath, and if the egg's temperature goes below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, the embryos in the eggs would die. So it is imperative that the eggs get removed as fast as possible and get them to an incubator.
And after you get the egg in the incubator, everything else that's mentioned in the previous videos would be used to take care of the eggs. Now that we talked about breeding dragons, let's get on to the rewilding them. Now, this also would beg the question, why rewild the dragon?
At the mountain dragon's heyday, they were the apex predators of Eurasia, and as many of its prey animals' populations increase today and the more wild areas are protected, the dragons could be used as controllers of the prey populations and their behaviors. Along with their extant prey species, other potential resurrected species, especially the woolly mammoths, would also become their prey again, and both their populations and behaviors can be managed by the hunting activities of the mountain dragons.
Now that we have a bit of an understanding why we should rewild, the question is, how do we rewild the dragon? It's not going to be an easy feat, I promise you that.
For the individual dragons destined for rewilding, we will need to choose which dragons are both genetically strong, so they could establish populations with a good gene pool. When raising the dragon chicks that are chosen to be rewilded, this is where the dragon puppets will be very useful in both teaching them proper dragon behaviors and having them not imprint on humans so that they won't rely on humans for food. As well as using puppets to raise them, the dragon chicks will need to be in an exhibit that is big enough for them to be able to fly comfortably, to have their flight muscles ready, is away from humans so that they won't become comfortable to human activities, and cage-like so that the dragons can be exposed to the elements and adapt to it, but make certain that caves are available so that they could have shelter from the worst of the elements. As they live in this enclosure, they will need to have access to the large prey animals that they would hunt like deer and elk, so that they'll not only get fed, but they would also learn both how to hunt and what prey they should hunt, and hopefully try to teach them to go after wild prey rather than livestock or even humans. Another part of the rewilding process that is needed that would be both extremely expensive and dangerous is that platinum would need to be available, and the dragon chicks would need to be taught to go after platinum with the dragon puppets. On an added note, both the dragon puppets and rewilding enclosure would need to be fire-proofed so that they don't go up in flames.
As the dragons grow and learn to be wild, best time to release them into the wild is when they're around 6 years old. Because basically 1 year before sexual maturity, apparently according to the documentary, that's when they would be sent off on their own. And the best way to release them is primarily to just like open the gate and just book the enclosure in the area where they're going to be initially be introduced to. That way you could just open the gate and the dragon can come in and out as it pleases until it feels completely comfortable just going off on its own.
You could just get the dragon tranquilized, placed into a trailer or crate, and released into the desired area, but we are uncertain if dragons are like carrier pigeons and could trace themselves back to where they were from, so take caution with this. Before releasing the mountain dragon into the wild, you would definitely need to have a radio collar or a GPS tag on the dragon, so that you would be able to track the dragon's movements and whereabouts for both study and watching out for human-wildlife conflicts.
When we do reintroduce the dragon, what kind of ecological effects will they have? Now mind you, the documentary doesn't really tell us much about the ecological effects that the dragons have, but judging from what the documentary does tell us, and what we know about large predators and flying predators, we can get some pretty good ideas, and even with the unique traits of the dragon.
As mentioned earlier in the video, the mountain dragon would most likely be the apex predator of the Eurasian ecosystem. With them being a large predator weighing well over 1,000 pounds, mountain dragons would definitely be mega predators that primarily rely on large prey animals. Back in the Ice Age, according to the mockumentary, the mountain dragon did hunt the woolly mammoths, but they also would have hunted other megafauna, such as the steppe bison and the Irish elk. But when the Ice Age ended and most of the megafauna died out, the population of the dragons would have dropped significantly, but there were some megafauna still around, like the moose, bison, aurochs, wild boar, and others. As mentioned before, the mountain dragon would be an apex predator, and the general ecological effects of apex predators are that they would manage the populations of large prey animals, and they would also manage behavior of the prey animals as well. For example, their hunting activities would keep the prey animals from overgrazing in one location, keep them from eroding riparian areas by overstaying there, and even to just favor one type of plant over other species of plants. Along with prey animals, the dragon would also have an effect on predators as well. They would make these large predators more timid, commence in niche partitioning, as in trying to not directly compete with the dragon for food, and maybe even hunt them as prey.
Though for a large flying animal like the dragon, there will be an issue. One is that during the Ice Age, there were a lot more grasslands and open plains that the dragon could be able to do its thing and hunt. But in the more recent era, like even up to the Middle Ages, Europe became more forested, which of course would be an issue for a large flying dragon. But I do have a theory on a particular behavior that the mountain dragon might actually commence, and that with its fiery breath, it would actually cause wildfires to start. Now, I would say that they would actually start wildfires with their fiery breath so that both A, they could be able to change the environment to make it more open so that they can be able to get prey better, and B, that they can actually use their fire to be able to drive animals out of the forest and into the open where they can easily get them. Now, mind you, this does seem a little far-fetched, but it's not as far-fetched as you think. Well, obviously, we don't have in reality, we don't have actual fire-breathing animals in the real world, but in nature, there are some birds of prey, like black kites in Australia, that are known to actually start or expand wildfires by getting a burning twig and move them to another area, so they could be able to expose the ground for prey and even dry prey out into the open. So it's not too far-fetched to think that a dragon might do something similar.
This burning behavior would have an effect on the forest ecology as well. This burning would help clear out dry vegetation, open up forests, expand meadow and grassland habitats, which would increase the populations of certain animals, including most of the desired prey species, and reintroduce nutrients into the soil.
With all this in mind, along with being an apex predator, the mountain dragon would be a keystone species, meaning that it would be a very important animal in the ecology, and would even be considered to be an environment or ecosystem engineer, which basically means that its activities would immensely alter the structure and functions of the local ecology. When human civilization expanded and became more developed, probably with the help of the ancient Roman Empire, humans would start again the conflict with dragons. Humans would harm the dragon by both destroying its habitat and overhunting of its favorite prey animals, to the point that populations would either become locally extinct, or even complete extinctions, like the now extinct wild cattle aurochs and the extinct wild horse, the tarpan. As the population of their prey decreased or pretty much completely wiped out, this will force the mountain dragon to be able to go after farmers' livestock, which has been proven with the Romanian cave in the documentary. Another way that dragons could be a conflict for people is that the hypothetical burning behavior I mentioned before. They would probably burn down forests, which would destroy human infrastructure, and would even burn down crops, which would obviously no farmer would want that. And according to some myths, some large fires were said to be caused by dragons. So this is probably where it reigns from. Of course, this and especially them going after livestock will definitely inspire the myth of the dragon. And of course, this will definitely make them undesirable for humans. So along with lack of prey and overhunting of destruction of their habitat and overhunting their prey, then when they start slaying the dragons for like generalistic dragon slaying, this caused the dragons to die off to the point that, according to the documentary, the last dragon would die off in the late 1400s. When mountain dragons get resurrected and reintroduced back in the wild, I could definitely imagine that they will have a lot of effects on the modern ecology when they return to the wild. Along with reintroducing them into areas that's far from civilization, at least for big towns and cities, it'll be necessary to be able to reintroduce dragons into areas where their desired prey, especially large animals like moose, bison, and so forth, are in great enough numbers. So I would definitely say that research on the prey-to-prey ratio for dragons and their desired prey would need to be researched on, as well as making sure how much of an area they will need for this.
Along with the prey, the competing predators will need to be in healthy population numbers as well, for the introduction of the dragon would cause a huge drop in the numbers of predators, much like how the wolves in Yellowstone affected the park's coyote population. And if the predators' populations are in a bad state, the dragon would accidentally eradicate them into local extinction. Mountainous areas or prey-rich areas near mountains and slasher cliffs would be preferable, since large flying predators usually love those areas for both safe roosting and easy place to launch themselves to fly. Also, having caves for nesting, hibernation, and platinum deposits would be desired as well. Speaking of caves, since bears like to use caves for hibernation as well, mountain dragons and bears would be in great competition with each other for caves. This would probably encourage the European brown bear to dig their own den to avoid competition with dragons. Back in the Ice Age, it's possible that the mountain dragon also competed with cave bears for caves, and perhaps with early humans, including Neanderthals as well.
And speaking of humans, I think I speak for everyone that we know that when dragons get reintroduced back into the wild, there's definitely going to be a lot of conflicts between humans and dragons. Whether the dragons are harming the humans, or the humans harming the dragons. And if we want to be able to make certain that both A, they able to coexist properly together, and B, that the dragons can be able to have a future in the world, especially in the wild, there are definitely many things that we need to be consider or acknowledge.
The first thing on people's minds on the possibility of dragons back to the wild is that if the dragons would hunt humans? From what the cave in the mockumentary showed us is that while the adult female mountain dragon would attack and even kill humans to defend themselves and their young, they don't seem to be interested in consuming the human remains or even hunting humans in the fields. So, I would say that while there might be some exceptions, I would say that the mountain dragon wouldn't generally consider humans as prey. There are large predators today that have the potential to hunt humans, but usually don't and stay away from humans, such as mountain lions and jaguars in the Americas. The next thing on people's minds would be of dragons hunting livestock. According to the mockumentary, the dragon has been feasting on medieval domestic sheep who usually weigh between 20 to 66 pounds back then, compared to the average modern 100 to 350 pounds in weight, and it could be possible that it could have gone after goats, cattle, and maybe even horses.
One way that we could be able to avoid this kind of conflict is to make certain that the wild prey animals' numbers far outnumber the resident livestock.
Usually having livestock guardian animals would help curb the predation rate onto livestock, but I don't think I would have to explain why all known livestock guardian animals such as dogs, llamas, and donkeys have any sort of way to defend a farmer's flock or herd from a large fire-breathing dragon.
Since we cannot rely on livestock guardian animals to be able to protect our livestock from dragons, there are a few ways that we could be able to do that. One is to make certain that in the fields where they are, make sure there is a forest, a cluster of trees, or fireproof shelters, for obvious reasons, so that the livestock can learn, whether you taught them or they learn themselves, that they can be able to, when a dragon's around, they can go into the dense forest, to the cluster of trees, or into the shelter, just so the dragons won't be able to get to them. That's one way we could be able to do it. Another is that we need to know when these dragons are active. We don't know. We're not entirely certain if mountain dragons are particularly diurnal, they come out of the day, nocturnal, come out at night, or crepuscular, somewhere in between. But if we know when they're active during the day, we could be able to let our livestock out when the dragons are not out and about, and put them in sheltered pens when the dragons are up and about.
One high-tech solution that could help is the usage of laser technology. Today, in many places, laser technology is used to keep birds off of crops by having a program that can identify a preferred target from anything else and shoot a laser at it, preferably its eyes, and it would agitate the dragon enough that it would abandon the pursuit and fly off. Mind you, it is uncertain that it would work, but it is a possible solution. A problem that dragons would present that is completely unique to them is that the mountain dragon could cause forest fires for hunting purposes, and such fires would become threats to human lives and infrastructure. One of the ways to help with this to make certain that settled areas in or near dragon territories would have a fire alarm system that would warn them of wildfires, whether caused by a dragon or not at the earliest, and that local firefighters are thoroughly trained in dealing with wildfires as well as have the equipment for it. Also have the residents follow basics in preventing wildfire hazards, such as taking down dead trees, make certain that there is a distance between the infrastructure and woods, and so on. With them being large flying animals, the mountain dragon is going to learn the hard way that it is no longer the largest thing in the sky with airplanes and helicopters in the same space. It's uncertain whether the conflict with planes and helicopters would be accidental, like pigeons in airports, or confrontational like how wedge-tailed eagles would fight with helicopters. But both are a danger to both the vehicles and dragons. Some things that I think would need to be done is to make certain that dragon territories are known, so that pilots could be told and will be on watch for the dragon, as well as making certain that radar could be able to detect the dragon in the air. Also, if possible, a way to teach dragons to avoid airplanes and helicopters would be needed as you rewild the mountain dragons. There is possibly one problem that dragons would present is an extremely unique one: conflicts with the platinum mining industry. Like I have mentioned before, platinum is a rare and valuable mineral that is pretty expensive. Platinum is valuable for jewelry, electronics, lasers, and even for hydrogen fuel cells. With it being like all of that, the platinum mining industry would be up in arms against the dragons, and the dragons would devastate any platinum mining operation that it would come across. I honestly have no idea how the mines could be helped with this. The only solution I could think of is that reliable alternatives to platinum will need to be invested into so that the conflict between the mining industry would be dropped. While dragons can be a risk to humans and their livelihoods, humans can also be a danger to them as well. Perhaps even more so now than what it was like in the Middle Ages. Continued habitat destruction would negatively affect the populations of the dragon's prey, which would increase human-wildlife conflict between dragons and farmers. Airplane and helicopter collisions would definitively be a threat to the dragon's lives. Also, poachers would probably be the biggest threats to the mountain dragons. Just like with rhino horn and other wildlife products, dragon bones and blood would be immensely valuable in traditional Chinese medicine, and there is no doubt that the resurrection and reintroduction of the mountain dragon would ignite a high demand in these products, as well as possibly their eggs, and it would encourage poachers to hunt these dragons down for the money. With this in mind, rangers would need to be in place in dragon territory to protect the dragons and other animals of the ecosystem from the poachers. According to the mockumentary, mountain dragons go into hibernation for the winter, and they are immensely vulnerable in this state, which was how the knights were able to kill the adult female dragon that was found in the cave. With this in mind, rangers would need to keep tabs on where the dragons would hibernate, at least for the first many generations of dragons until they become classified as least concern, and make certain that the dragons are not disturbed in this state. As we conclude this 3-video special, I hope that it would give you all perspective of what if dragons were real, and what if we were able to resurrect and reintroduce them back into the wild. These actions will have many pros and cons, good deals and trade-offs, whether it would be dragons or other long-lost creatures from both nature and our fantasies. These would be living, breathing creatures, with their own behaviors, instincts, and even choices. As technology advances and our understanding of the natural world improves, we try to fix our past mistakes and even unintentionally make new ones. There are those who have faith in progress and those who fear it. I personally say that I am both, meaning while I definitely know progress can make things better, I also know that progress can go in directions that make things worse than before. My fear keeps me cautious, but my faith moves me forward. Forward towards not a perfect future for this world, but one better than the one we left behind, especially for this new year. If you have made it this far, I want to say thank you ever so kindly for watching my last video of this trilogy.
I want to say thank you to Keenan Taylor and Taliesaurus. Their artwork and skills have been able to make my vision into a reality. If you want to support them, I'll send you links to their pages down below. I also want to say thank you to all of my supporters. from subscribers to Patreons, and even those who are just simply watching. It really helps out. If you hadn't already, like, subscribe. And if you want to, become a patron on Patreon, on my Patreon page. I will send a link down below. Thank you. I really hope each and every one of you have a grand day and a happy new year. Adios.